Hello guys, today we're talking about one of the most important revolutions in history, the French Revolution. So we're gonna start talking about the reasons why it started. The first cause of the French Revolution was the worsening of the financial state in the French government, which was caused by the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution War, increasing a huge economic crisis. The king and the nobility were consuming large amounts of the country's wealth and also unfair tax laws against the more poor French people. The second cause was an economic depression caused by a downturn in manufacturing and trade, several years of poor agricultural harvests, and the incomes were decreasing as shortage in food caused price to increase, like bread. And the third cause of the French Revolution was the new ideas of the Enlightenment movement spreading across France, mostly on the people of the third state. Oh, I didn't tell you that the French population was divided in three classes: the church in first, second nobility, and the bottom was the third state, which was the commoners. The people in charge at that time was Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette of Austria, who were spending huge amounts of money and living their best life in the Palace of Versailles, while France was facing an economic crisis and hunger. Plus, a severe winter in 1788 resulted in a famine which brought the prices of bread in Paris to increase and widespread starvation, causing the bread riots. Well, what happened in the bread riots? Well, to make it short, a shortage of flours, homes were robbed, then a lot of bakers got killed, basically because people were hungry. They didn't have money to pay for the bread because it was expensive. And what was the solution? Well, the first two states actually agreed to make the third state to pay more taxes to solve the economic crisis. And the thing is, the first two states didn't actually pay taxes, or if they pay, it was almost nothing. After other disagreements, the delegates of the third state declared themselves the National Assembly, representing the people of France, and took the tennis court oath, swearing to meet until they create a new constitution. So now with the inequalities between the third state and the other two states, as well as hunger and poverty, led the third state to attack the nobles and demand a new constitution. In this tense atmosphere, fear that the royal troops would occupy Paris led the Parisians to storm the Bastille, which was like a prison, in search of weapons believed to be stored there. So the success of the storm of the Bastille is considered to be the start of the French Revolution. It happened in July 14 in 1789. Now, after this event, the National Assembly, who were mostly bourgeoisie, who were like rich and educated commoners, under the charge of Robespierre, declared the Rights of Man, which was a fundamental document of the French Revolution that granted civil rights to the French people, justice under fair laws, get rid of divisions, and wanted a constitutional monarchy. While this was happening, in October 5th of 1789, dozens of thousands of women from the marketplaces of Paris, concerned over the high prices and scarcity of bread, led the march on the Palace of Versailles. Eventually, in a violent forcing, the isolated royal family was forced to return to Paris and finally faced this mess. After leaving the Palace of Versailles, now the royal family was placed in Tuileries Palace, and Louis, with not so much to do, signed the Rights of Man. But of course, Louis was not going to accept these terms. So on the night of June 20th of 1791, Louis, Marie Antoinette and their children tried to escape to Austria. Not this Austria, this Austria. Sadly, their intent to escape was unsuccessful and were returned to their palace in Paris. Because the Queen Marie Antoinette was from the Austrian royal family, Austria decided to interfere in France against the revolutionaries. With the help of Prussia, this plus other rising revelations across all of France against the revolution, this made the fear of the most radical people of the revolution to find a way to change this situation, and the idea of the king dying so the revolution could succeed was growing rapidly. with the invention of the guillotine, which was an execution instrument that gave the same fast and apparently painless death to everybody, the first important execution with a guillotine was the king himself, who had a trial in which he was found guilty of treason and got executed on the guillotine in January 21st of 1793. And the queen also had the same fate, who got found guilty of high treason and accused of incest with her sons. But this probably was false. And in October 16 of 1793, died in the guillotine. But this was also the beginning of a dark age in France during this revolution, the Reign of Terror. During this Reign of Terror, the most radical revolutionaries, who were called Jacobins, with Robespierre at the command, they started mass trials and executions where mostly were unfair. This happened of the paranoia of Robespierre of trying to eliminate the enemies of the revolution, and him with other 11 people declared the Committee of Public Safety, which basically took control over France. One of the most important actions of this group of people was the descrinization of France and making the church lose power. Some of these actions were nationalizing the church property. In October of 1793, the Christian calendar was replaced and new forms of moral religion emerged, just like the deity's cult of the supreme being. Yes, the thing was getting out of hand at this moment. After all these changes, a lot of revolutionaries started to question this way the revolution was going, with this descriminalization and mass executions, but the turning point to make this stop was the death of the head of these ideals, Robespierre. And the turning point was that one day Robespierre decided that he would post the name of the ones he thought were the enemies of the revolution among the National Assembly, and that he created fear among most of them who decided to make a stop on this. Before Robespierre went full Death Note mode, he got arrested, were humiliated in his last moments, he went to prison and finally got executed on the guillotine in July 28, 1904, finishing in this way a dark page of the revolution, but not the revolution itself. That would still take some years to finally finish with the rise of Napoleon to power. But that's another topic, and this was my briefly resume of the French Revolution. Thanks for watching. See you next time.